All right, we're back out in the shop again, obviously. And we're still fighting headers. So these headers here have been out, feels like 1,000 times. So the last version of the problem was that pipe. So that little downward angle here, that kink there, that was the difference, we hope, that allows that to clear the floor. So the issue that I'm having is I want this to be obviously not the lowest point, so the wastegate wants to hang down too low. Like if you look at this side here, the wastegate could be a little bit further forward, and of course it had to be because we're trying to clear the shifter, and still could pull it up just that far. Obviously very little air gap there, and sucked it over as far as we could to make that clear. The floor of the car runs like right here, so there's only so much you can do. And then on this side, it appears to be a lot more room, but I was trying to give myself room to get to this dipstick. So the wastegate's right here, I just can't get to it, so the wastegate moved back like that. And so that kind of makes it work, but obviously it's been kind of problematic because the further you move it back, the floor up here gets closer and closer to your pipe. So this general angle here, I mean, you can see that the heat shielding of where the cats used to go is a perfect place to put turbos, and heat management with turbos down here is still way better than under the hood. So in theory, I have what I need right now. So we had to add another coupler here. It's not tight, but I just needed some more flex, basically, some give, so that the pipe doesn't have to be perfectly aligned for depth and everything else. And then maybe this weekend we'll get this header all on, get her all together. It's obviously time to get this thing back on the road. We have almost spring outside. The other thing I was working on is trying to get I have a one-piece aluminum drive shaft that I've had in the car already. You know, drive shaft connects from here down to there, but it vibrates. And the factory drive shaft is 2 pieces with steady bearing mounting right here and this multi-piece setup. So I was curious if my one-piece drive shaft was just not perfectly balanced, or if there was some angle problems going to a one-piece. And from what I found is the balance was perfect, and the it's got to be in the geometry, because I had to machine shop balance it again, and they said it took nothing. It was good to any reasonable RPM. So yeah, what do you do, right? Trying to have strength, stronger drive shaft, and also none of the drawbacks of modified cars. So it's not really a possibility. This drive shaft here, as far as I know, this isn't even how they fail. From what I know, what I've seen, I've usually seen the tubes corkscrew. So maybe we'll just get this one cut down and put thick tubes on it, and the thing just gets heavier. But look at these U-joints. The caps have been spinning in the, and you can see that the snap rings have rotated under torque. There's no indication on feel that there's any problem with these. You can just see the factory paint marks show that this spins under hard torque, and that usually eventually leads to a clip popping out. It used to, at least in the off-road stuff. And then the cap jumps off and the U-joint dies a fantastic death at however many 1,000 RPM as the drive shaft flails against the floor of your car. So, look at that, eh? Scrap if dropped. So those are the things I'm fighting with. This is like the third time this combo of parts has been put together, so you can tell I'm chasing the little stuff now, but yeah, we'll see how it goes this weekend. Okay, so we are, as you've seen, trying to fit an intercooler in this space. And the intercooler is not a monster, but not even as big as it should be, but it should do the trick for now for the 800 horsepower goal. But I want to fit it, and I'd like to have it hooked to the frame so that when future body off service work has to occur, I can leave all the lower plumbing hooked up and just the ducting and everything can be leave connected, and I should be able to lift because the cooling stack stayed behind. I want the intercooler to work with that cooling stack and only be frame mounted so that when I lift it up, it can all stay coupled. Because the way these cars work is service work, as you've seen, with the subframe on the ground level and the car off of it is about as easy as it gets. So making it harder to separate those two by modifying the car, modifications that make it more likely we'll have to work on it, it's not the goal. So that's what I'm trying to prove. Let's see if I can pull it off. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, so we've been working down here off this angle iron piece here to bring it wide enough that it matches with the bracket width. And we're going to bolt it on that way. Got a little foam stuck in here, so I'm hoping to keep a little bit of air gap, although I might ditch the bumper eventually, but I'm kind of like it on the front of the car so that not just the slightest bump means you've kicked your intercooler in and broken the whole front nose. But yeah, so that's what's going on here. I'm not really confident that that's strong enough yet. I think it can hold the weight. I'm just not sure of the upward vibration or the fore and aft vibration. So I'd like to like rubber mount something here, but I think I might just embrace the silicone coupler here and then do a really good tie down on the back here into the frame to act as the upward stability with some rubber in it. Try to make the parts that are there, like a silicone coupler is actually really strong, and I don't really need it for it to carry this kind of weight. I got lots of that strength available, but I don't think it's got any stability for this kind of weight, for vibrations and flicking back and forth. So that's in the engineering phase yet. By engineering, I mean trial and error. Okay, so what do you think? I've got a lot of wobble here. Kind of was expecting that, but I wonder if I could just put a rubber bumper in there just to take the vibration out of it. And then add what I was thinking is the coupler there. And then have the coupler come through here and then anchor that really well. And then the coupler itself would be the anti-vibration device. Let's see if I can, some guys remove the bumper because you look at that and it's blocking a lot of airflow. And I can't move it backwards very much at all because that kind of ends it. But if you look at removing the bumper, this is the front of the car. That whole bumper space in there, there's no airflow right in front of it. So removing the bumper, you might be able to get more sneaking in behind it, top and bottom. But yeah, if you look at what holds the front of this car up, there's like 2 screws, bolts here, and then there's this top row of bolts there on the other side. So the bumper itself kind of fits into this space, and so it kind of holds the front of the car up. I mean, I don't know how crash worthy it makes it. I'm sure it does something. It's lightly reinforced. I tried to drill that bumper stuff before. It's very hardened. It eats drill bits. But yeah, so I could see keeping that and like cutting, plasma gutting it like that, so you could get some more air behind it to get into the intercooler. I think I'll probably just leave it alone and see if there's a problem or not. Yeah, so that's one thing mocked up. Obviously I need a little bit of paint on that and some hardware. All right, well, it's been a busy weekend so far. We've got what I think is a drivetrain ready for final install. So we've got our whole cooling stack in place. We did the intercooler brackets hooked to the frame. So the intercooler brackets bolt to the frame end right here. And then we'll take this tube and steady it to the frame or to the body to keep some vibration out of this, just in case it wants to crack the bracket. But our whole cooling stack is pre-assembled. This is how these cars were kind of built. So my goal is to make the turbo system also be assemblable in a way that allows me to just put the body back on it, because it's just way nicer to work on these. So everything has to be tied up and carried on the top here. So and the body comes down, and we'll set the cameras aside for that. But yeah, so we're almost ready for that install. I've got to do one more wire here. I like to put a plug in on everything that connects together, and then it's like the OEM built it, which is I call pretty good. And the steering shaft is right here. When you take those apart, you can just throw the steering shaft up on top of the wiring there, and then it's ready for you when you come back down. The biggest problem when you're separating these things, there's one brake line. This, not the biggest, but it's odd how much of a problem it is. This brake line goes down through under the sway bar, and it just kind of goes into the abyss there. And so that brake line, you just have to unhook it from way up there in the corner at the ABS block. And that's just no way around that, but you're better off opening the brake system than having to deal with the whole cooling stack and the sway bar to get the car to come apart. Because the cooling stack can just stay, the intake can stay, everything can stay on the subframe. I've basically just got the subframe on some, well, jack stands and some very redneck jack stands, but they are tack welded. I mean, you know, I needed a 5-lug pattern out of one, so I cut that one apart. So this is the that's the good one, if you remember the Ford Ranger days. Anyways, about the turbo system. Now that it's fully installed, what I've been fighting with on this side, which was my last piece, this is all original here. Original JBA shorties. Cut the flange off here. These are stainless cast Sked 40 pipe. This is a transition, a 2.5 to a 2 3/4. And this wastegate caused me a lot of trouble. The floor is basically right here, and so all of this little pie cut work was to clear the floor. The wastegate position on this side is a little longer. Like, I can see this being a fatigue point, but my goal was to make it so that I could work on the dipstick for the transmission. So there's actually room there. Well, you're going to burn your hand a little bit, but at least it's accessible. Otherwise, this side has a little more room for wastegate. The other side, the wastegate's a lot closer, because it has to be, because the shifter dominates the space problem over here. So we got the cooler lines and the shifter, and then the idea of using a JBA header on this side wasn't worth much. That header has been cut very many ways, and it might as well have started out from, pretty much could have started out with a flange and some pipe and done just as good, but it's there now. This is my wastegate reference. Obviously some pretty fancy tin foil, but we don't want it to burn off on the header. All the wastegate, or sorry, all the intercooler plumbing's just going underneath. This has all been run multiple seasons already, so it's got some dirt on it. But these are, I think those are roll bar mounting devices. Anyways, those have taken some hits, you can see. But those do a good job of protecting the low point there. And if it was better at aluminum, there'd be less clamps. Aluminum welding, that is, but that all clears easy. This is a Chinese intercooler, and it's probably too small, but it fits nice. I'm trying to make 800 horse, which isn't pushing that hard. 800 horse is so easy to some, to others it's a little harder. Not that you can't make 800 once. It's can you do it without taking it apart every weekend? And I do not have E85, so we're working with that. But anyways, this is the last good look over on everything here before we put the lid on it. Hopefully it'll run soon. I've got some more wiring to do in here, but otherwise I think I'm ready to put the lid on. We'll drop the car on it and start connecting a few more things. Just giving it a good look over. See things starting to come in. Air conditioning lines and stuff are really close on this side. All that harness has to be tied up there. This strut wants to catch on things going up and down. And then we have to do the drive shaft before it's all the way up. So the drive shaft and the shifter cable, kind of got to do them when it's about 5 to 6 inches from mated to the car. Because of my ceiling height problems, I have to do the hood up here in a little bit. I cannot have the hood up and have the car lifted up. Should be able to. Okay, well, we got it all connected. Not really. Got some bolts in it, so all the parts move together now anyways. Let's put this light into the car. Make everything look a little bit brighter. No, it's not a fluorescent, it's an LED. So, yeah. So we were fighting to get those drive shaft steady bearing bolts. But once those are in, that's all up there. Got some connections to do down here. But you can see that my fight to make my dipstick tube accessible worked out. Yeah, so there's lots of little work to do yet, but at least these are all one now. Well, it's time to update this project. I have been working on it for quite some. We got to the point where the engine's in, and as soon as I could, I attempted to start the car. So drive shaft's not even connected. There's no fluid in it. But I like to learn things early on, and what I learned, among the fact that my battery died over the winter and it's not coming back, and that this place is a disaster, is that I have an exhaust leak on the right sorry, the driver's side manifold after all that. So I'm trying to decide whether I drop the motor out the bottom again or try to deal with it in place. But anyway, that happens when you do custom things. But it's not actually time for dealing with that. It's time to clean up. Because what happened is the shop gets to be a disaster, and this place is so small that you're tripping over things. So this foam, this junk here, is up there, and I've been keeping it for 10 years for something I don't know. Anyway, the other day it fell off the shelf, hit this jack hand. Jack handle just being there, falls over this way. And boom, we got a new nick in the paint. It's usually my sign to clean up. Regroup. And here we are again. A somewhat familiar looking scene. End of same day. We did get a cleanup done. We have some bench space. And then we took it all apart again. So I'm getting better at, well, I made it better for unplugging, like little stuff that has water messed up. Everything can be unplugged and left down here as a module. Because race car stuff, you might as well just have it set up to take apart. I know this doesn't look very serviceable, but it was only about 2 hours of work to get back to this point. I didn't have the drive shaft in all the way, or the exhaust in all the way, and the whole nose cone wasn't on. But otherwise it was in enough to run. So I will bring home my smoke machine from work, which I should have done this before I put it back on the first time. And hopefully the smoke will show me where it's leaking. I'm guessing it's a flange, because I had some trouble with these flanges and I machined them with a belt sander, which I guess you wouldn't call machining, you would call that sanding. Anyways, there isn't a whole bunch to it, but I always seem to forget something. This time I forgot to disconnect my boost control solenoid, and so now it's, well, it unplugged itself. See what all died to make that happen. There's a couple wires at the back of the firewall here that are easy to forget. And to pull the whole subframe out, the easiest thing to do is you have to disconnect the brake lines. And they go up, and they are zip tied here. But they were actually on the ABS module near the firewall, near the back of the strut, like basically lives over here. And which means you have to bleed them again, and then just under the top of the struts. This one line here crosses over underneath everything, and if you leave it behind, then the whole cooling stack can be left behind, and that is a lot less work. So yeah, this is kind of the pop the hood on these things, it seems like. If you're not good at fixing things right, make sure you're good at taking them apart. Okay, so with the car off the motor again, we got the smoke machine hooked up to the tailpipe here, and we can see all the little leaks everywhere, which, I mean, these dump valves leak pretty bad. But those aren't the serious ones that are making the noises. But this up here, let's see if you can see this with me. Yeah, you see that there? That's a pretty serious leak at that flange up there. And it looks like it's coming out. Between the flange and the right there, between the pipe and the flange. We got another one up there too. See that one? I got something leaking in there too. Okay, we've got the header off and put it back on again. And the headers have been welded now on the outside of the tube as well. The factory style, or the stock way, the aftermarket header design welded on the inside and then machines it flat, and I machined it too flat and machined off too much of the weld in the flange. Alright, we've got a lot of smoke coming out here. I don't think that flange is done up right. Yeah. Okay. So that one is no good. And once you got one leak, you can't see nothing. Alright, so these V-bands actually aren't perfect. So real world, especially once you cycle them a couple times and twist the bands up a little bit, you warp them a little bit when you weld them. But that compared to what we had before is kind of the acceptable leak amount. You can see it kind of curling up there. Well, here we are again. Motor is back in. We haven't tried to crank it yet, but that is the next move. Let's see what noises and problems await. Well, that's a good start, literally. Let's see what happens when we add some antifreeze. See where that falls out. idling. Well, it's running. It's been a fight. We've still got a fuel rail pressure code, possibly some transmission programming concerns, but the fluids are in it. It's been heat cycled. Gonna go for a little drive around the block, see what we get. Well, we didn't get too far. We're still in the shop. Haven't really gone anywhere. So it says R, but it won't back up. We'll go into drive, but 9th gear. So that's probably not right. So maybe I totally screwed the transmission, but I still have the valve body strategy was never typed in, so I'm not sure how critical that is. Is that shift timing or is that a no-go? I'm hoping right now it's a no-go. Well, we're in the car and we got that. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fix this feeling. I've had this lots in my life, and usually I get stubborn and solve it. But right now, car runs, will not move, has a fuel rail pressure fault, which could be wiring, or the sensor seems to be alright. And more importantly, it's got some transmission shift faults that make it not work at all. So I did the programming here, laptop, and after we got the programming done for the new valve body, we did another code pull, and we got this fault, and transmission kind of does weird things. If you start the car, you put it in drive, it tries first gear, and then it doesn't move. You put it in reverse, it considered it, but then it does all this. And now it's 10th gear when you put it in drive, or 9th. And you can like put it in sport, paddle shift it back to first, and the car will slowly creep forward, but something's not happy in there, and that's definitely at least the valve body coming out. So we'll have more fun later. Well, this thing drove around the block once. And that was an accomplishment. So last update we had 2 issues. One of them was the fuel pressure was doing weird things on the fuel rail. And that was me being silly. I forgot that there was 2 fuel rail pressure sensors and I was checking the wrong one. That was just a plug-in issue. So that was just a me. The other one was less fun. This is my stock valve body. Way back we've seen the videos of me building the transmission, and turns out one solenoid was bad in the Suncoast valve body. So I took it out of the stock valve body and swapped it over, and now it drives. So it wasn't just the first thing I tried, obviously, but that's the procedure. So we'll get this thing tuned up and off to the dyno here pretty soon. But yeah, mobile again. Almost thought it wasn't going to get there. Anyways, next update will not be from inside this mess. As you can see, we had a fair thrash again. Typical fluid everywhere. Yeah, the end of a job push.